everyone, what's going on? Jeff from Jeff's Vintage. Today I wanted to bring out something special from the vault. Man, we're not just showing a guitar today, we're showing a ghost, a survivor. 1957, late 57, 1958 Gretsch White Falcon. You know, if you know Gretsch, they always kind of march to their own drum, no pun intended. They used to make drums. But they always did things a little bit differently. You know, Gibson and Fender were chasing each other, you know, utilitarian guitars. Gretsch was Vegas, baby. Big bodies, gold hardware, Art-Deco hardware and bigs, just over the top, you know, fat, beautiful guitars. A little bit of Vegas, a little bit of Cadillac, a little bit of rockabilly, and a whole lot of attitude. Think like 1980s hair. This is 1950s swag. So when this bad boy debuted in 54, it was the most expensive guitar that you could buy. This was not the working man's guitar. This was a showpiece. This was a headliner's guitar. This was for the cowboys and, you know, the rockabilly stars. You know, the electric guitar was just invented like in the early 50s. So this is kind of like a crossover between an acoustic and an electric. They were still figuring stuff out. Our top construction on these things is just insane. It's beautiful. They were all handmade in small batches. So when this guitar sold in 57, 58, it had a price tag of between $600 and $700. Roughly 5 times that of another, you know, competitor's electric guitar like a Fender or a Les Paul. You know, $600 is not a lot of money now, but if you go and adjust for inflation, $600 is like $7,000 now. So, you know, this was a $7,000 guitar in 1958. So you could imagine who was buying it. They were, you know, stars, country stars, you know, Elvis, Scotty Moore, Dwayne Eddy, these type people, you know, icons in music were buying these guitars. So, you know, here's the real kicker. These were so labor intensive and handmade. They were very hard to make. So they didn't make many of them. In 57, Gretsch, basically it's believed that they made around 300 Falcons. So, you know, 58 was a little bit of a slight increase, maybe 500 to 600 Falcons. And what most people don't realize is only a fraction of these guitars exist today. You know, a very small fraction. You know, people didn't know that they would become relics. They would become archived pieces, you know, centerpieces of collections. They just played them to death, like this one's been played. Look at the patina and the cream on that finish, just amazing, right? So by 58, you know, it's estimated that only, you know, they made what, 500 of them, 600 of them? It's estimated there's about 40 of them in the world that are still around, and you know, they're pretty special. You know, this one being a 57, 58, it's very rare and desirable because, you know, Gretsch was in transition. They were going from the old style to the new. Rock and roll was strong. You know, they needed a powerful, clean guitar. So this is some of the cool things that make this guitar totally awesome. What they did in the early 58s like this is they had the leftover bodies and the single coil toggle switch, the hump inlays instead of, you know, the intricate cactus and what have you and cows and stuff. And also it isn't quite yet the thumbnail. So you get the mid-tier transition logos. You get the single toggle switch, which a lot of fellas like. I mean, Brian Setzer never even uses the mud switch. He always switches that out. switch between pickups like a Gibson Les Paul. Anyways, the cool thing about this guitar is the aesthetic that they kept from the early 50s, and then the transition to the Filtertron pickups. It's talking to Kurt, it's very possible that these are some of the earliest prototype Filtertrons to come out of the Gretsch factory. Typically, this body style would have the fat single coils that everyone liked. Bottom line, one of the smallest production windows that Gretsch ever made. A combination of older aesthetics with newer electronics, simplicity, old versus new, and that kind of makes collectors and players like myself stand up. It's like, oh wow, I don't need the stereo thing with the crazy chords and the crazy 2 chords coming out and the mud switch. I like the Les Paul style, but I also like a humbucking pickup. And Filtertrons, man, the vintage Filtertrons are as good as you can get. Anybody from Hank Marvin to Chet Atkins to Chris Cornell will tell you that this is the best sounding pickup when you overdrive it, period. Nothing comes close. The chime, the bell, the clarity, and the grit. That's the secret of the cowboy sound, that twang. It's just outstanding. So this guitar shares some very, very special DNA. It was made late 57, early 58. The same batch and a couple of serial numbers over from the exact same specification guitar owned by David Gilmour. David Gilmour had a 58 Gretsch White Falcon with the exact same specs, single toggle, prototype Filtertrons, plain humps, big body, 54 style body, 58, 59 style electronics. That guitar was sold in 2019 before the big boom at Christie's auction for $140,000. Casper, its brother, is David Gilmour's guitar, literally. I won't tell you the serial number, but it's close, very close. They were made on the same day. They only made these things in, batches of 25, 50, 75 sometimes, and that was made in the same batch. If you ever want to talk about Falcons, get a hold of my buddy, Kurt Wilson over at Schoolhouse Guitars. He's an expert. He'll tell you, he's looked at the majority of them that are out there in circulation through the Gretsch family and the Gretsch, the Gretsch community that I'm a part of. But very cool, means this Casper's just a couple guitars away. Same bench, same period, same DNA. Late 57 special run, single master tone, like we're saying. Gretsch, last year they used it. Big fat body, pushing maximum air. The 60s and the 59s were a little bit thinner. This wasn't as big as the 54s, but it was pretty damn close with the good bracing as well. So this thing is just resonant. Just rings out. So the original Falcon aesthetic, unapologetically bold, coming to the future from the 58 to the 59 with the early Filtertrons, prototype era. These were pickups that would soon change electric guitar history, man. Clear, powerful, quiet, still unmistakably Gretsch. Casper, it's not just the Falcon, man. It's a blueprint. Very few guitars represent a moment of transition this clearly. The end of the Falcon era, the birth of the Filtertrons, one of the smallest production windows Gretsch ever had. Maybe a dozen of these guitars around, and this one survived. I'm Jeff. This is Casper. Thanks for watching Jeff's Vintage.